Welcome, everyone, to Dolls of Our Lives. This is the podcast where we're reliving the American Girl series book by book, except here on Patreon, where we're doing whatever you tell us or we decide lives in the world of our show. I'm Mary.
I'm Allison.
And we are here to talk about truly a beloved topic. Can't believe we're here. Wishbone.
Wishbone is new to me, but not new to the world.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a source of anxiety for me all week. Was like, you had told me you had never seen Wishbone before, and Wishbone is like a sacred childhood thing to me. So I was both concerned for myself going into it, like, what if it's not as magical as I remember this being? And also, like, what if you show up here and are like, I legitimately hate Wishbone? How would I move on?
My first tell, I wondered if it was true that I had not actually seen Wishbone. And then I started watching and I had presumed that Wishbone was a child, and Wishbone is a disaffected older American male. So that's what validated for me that I'd never seen a full episode, that I had walked past Wishbone, that I knew people who watched it. But beyond like the first few opening notes of the show, I know that I have never sat and watched Wishbone like front to tail. Like, wow. Never happened till this week.
I'm jealous of you. I wish I could be you and watch Wishbone for the first time.
It was interesting and surprising to me. Like, I've learned a lot this week about Soccer, who's like the lead Wishbone that we'll get into. And I decided to dabble a little bit, and we chose to watch an episode that's the same and then at least one episode that's different.
Yeah. So I watched First Impressions, aka Pride and Prejudice, starring Wishbone, and we both watched Digging Up the Past, Rip Van Winkle, and then you watched...
I watched the Hounds of Baskerville's take, in which Wishbone plays the detective. So, like, there's, like, a lot of, like, dog double meanings in that episode, and it was a very nice compliment to Digging Up the Past for reasons we can talk about. I thought of watching First Impressions, and then I thought, Jane Austen, like, I'm not going to go there this week. I'm going to go Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Wow. Can't go wrong. Love Sherlock Holmes, and also love Jane Austen. Yeah, so I mean, let's get into it. So first of all, you just never watched Wishbone, and is that because you were not taking in like PBS content as a child, or like or after school, or like at a certain age? Like, what happened?
I was babysat by a person in a family that often had PBS on prior to my arrival. So I know that I probably caught like glimpses of this, but I didn't tend to watch PBS programming. I'm not really sure. I think it may have been a function of like how we got TV. That's the only way that I can think of. Like, hypothetically, there were people who had like black boxes that weren't 100% cable boxes. And so there was always kind of like interesting ways, like it's no different today, right? Like, people have a different patchwork of how they watch television. I knew that Wishbone was a dog. I learned that he's a Jack Russell Terrier. I learned that this show was from 1995 to 1997. So I was the perfect age to have been watching Wishbone. He just was not part of my life.
Wow. Okay, but now he is, and that's a beautiful turn of events. I mean, it's wild to think that in my mind, Wishbone looms so large. Like, I was shocked to be confronted with the news that we only had Wishbone for 2 years, because in my memory, it was much longer than that. And maybe that's because I was watching reruns and what have you. But, you know, to be reminded of the fact that we lost Wishbone and Princess Diana in the same year.
Shocking.
I mean, is it on the same level? I'm not going to go there, but I'm just going to say, for me, Wishbone has the exact sensibility that I still enjoy, which is outright nerdiness. Like, to make a show, the premise of which is like getting kids interested in the stories of like so-called classic books or tales, pun not intended, through like using a dog, and then having, as you said, an adult male voice be the voice of that dog, which also has a tone of like, I'm over it, or like, I'm not like actually that invested in books or learning, or like, I'm too cool for school a little bit, but also sincere. That is like the exact tone that I enjoy.
So Larry Brantley is the voice actor, and Interestingly, his bio says former stand-up comedian, so he chose to
Dark.
leave that behind. Like he didn't want to be doing stand-up and Wishbone simultaneously, perhaps, which may have been smart. So what was interesting to me is, unless I missed it, there's no sort of like need episode by episode to give a conceit of like why this is happening. So we go with Wishbone like into a world created, like in the case of the episode we both watched, Digging Up the Past. Like we see Wishbone acting out Rip Van Winkle. No one explains to you why that's occurring. It's not like he falls into a book, right? Or there's like a specific reason why that's occurring.
Yes. And let me just give some background about how we got to this premise of the show. So there's an article that we will link to that's an oral history of Wishbone. And was prompted because there's such a huge nostalgic audience for Wishbone. People like me grew up on it. And basically, it was created by the same production company that produced Barney. And it was created and filmed in Dallas, and which is also interesting. So the actors they're drawing on are not people from LA per se. Like some of the main cast members are. But it's like kind of like almost like, remember all those teen shows filmed in North Carolina, which we'll be exploring in a later Patreon. This is kind of like what's going on here. So the person who like greenlit Wishbone, for which cost a fortune to produce, was like, don't worry, because I'm going to make a fortune on kids' toys, which is apparently where the money is in children's programming. And he felt that because he made a fortune off of Barney toys. Oh. And I was not a Barney person. Like that passed me by. I was too old. In hindsight, I'm aware that Selena and Demi Lovato come to us vis-a-vis Barney, but I always found Barney creepy. Like that song, he's like trying to hug you. Like, I don't really need a dinosaur trying to teach me stuff. Alternately, I was into this dog trying to teach us stuff, but the original idea was a dog named Knuckles, and then somebody was like, you can't call the dog Knuckles. No. And somehow they land on Wishbone. And the original premise was like, this dog named Wishbone, like grants wishes to people or something like that. And they were like, that doesn't really work. And then the producer had like a masterpieces of literature book that kind of summarizes so-called great books. And he was like, wow, what if this dog, like there was something going on in the family, and then he like teaches like us a lesson using a classic book that actually applies to the situation that's happening in the family. And so like that's how the premise happened.
So Wishbone is a learned dog.
Wishbone, for reasons that we will never know, has like a deep knowledge of great books.
I stumbled across a JSTOR article that noted that like Wishbone, for a certain generation and moment of television, it was like no one was putting Shakespeare on TV, but Wishbone had no problem.
Wishbone and Julia Stiles taught us all a hell of a lot about Shakespeare. I mean, like impossible to dispute that fact, at least for me personally.
Our opening says, what's the story, Wishbone? And we chose to go into an episode where there are two parallel plot lines, one of which is like young Joe has a task he needs to complete. He has to write an essay for history class, which I think is what prompted us to pick this episode. And there's sort of an exploration of local history and like things that have changed or stayed the same within his historic house that he lives in. And apart from that, Wishbone goes right into the story of Rip Van Winkle, who famously falls asleep and misses the American Revolution.
Yes, and wakes up and is like, wait a minute, like he stumbles on famously like a campaign speech, and he's like, I support King George. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, and then he's like, wait a second, where's my wife? And they're like, she's dead. And he's like, okay, never mind. Where's my son? And they're like, he's fine. And he's like, okay, great. I need to talk to her. Like, where's my daughter? Like, iconically, the part that Wishbone maintained was when he's like, where's my wife? And they're like, she's dead. And he's like, okay, moving on. Are you my daughter? Hey girl, can I live with you? It's like, it was a true adaptation to me.
You know that time has passed because Wishbone, in the role of Rip Van Winkle, wakes up after this long slumber, which is like partially explained, but you also get the sense, as in the true story, that there's like alcohol and mischief, and so they don't hit that too hard. It's labeled cider in the Wishbone episode. when he's conversing with his daughter, Wishbone has this like really comical beard, and that's how you're supposed to know that 20 years have passed.
It's so adorable. When he wakes up with the beard, I was like, this is like the best thing I've ever seen in my life. And like, honestly, this episode lives in my mind because when I took AP literature in high school, like American Lit, a guy in my class literally was like, we were supposed to read Rip Van Winkle. Like, have you ever actually read that story?
I have actually. And I've been to like the house where Washington Irving wrote it, like where he is out in New York.
Humble brag. Is it cool?
It is. His life is interesting for other reasons. Obviously, Washington Irving is known for like Headless Horseman and a number of other stories, and where he lives, the Sleepy Hollow area, is just very beautiful, and it kind of situates why Rip Van Winkle is like a Dutch character as well, because it's a majorly like Dutch regional area.
It was kind of like, in hindsight, a meta selection for us because it's like a story about nostalgia, and it's like, this is a topic about which I at least have nostalgia, and maybe you will develop some now that you're aware of Wishbone. But like, the contemporary story was like, he has to write a paper about something that no longer exists that he wished we still had. And like, basically he meets a doctor who ends up like having grown up in his house and shows him like a secret compartment in his own room, which he never noticed, ? I don't know, Joe. And then like they end up finding like a time capsule that she buried as a child. And like, she's like, oh yeah, this is like, reminds me of these baseball games we used to go to in town for a team that no longer exists. And he's like, aha, that's what I'm gonna write my paper about. But what do you make of the fact that the story for the contemporary premise is of a widowed woman and her son? Like, what's up with that choice? Which I never found explanation of.
So I guess because Wishbone has such a masculine presence, they figured they didn't need a dad figure. Or maybe because typically in a 90s sitcom, the dad would be the goofy foil who is like hapless and useless, but also like dominates certain things. I was like really struck by the decision to have the doctor that he interacts with, the woman who comes back to visit the house, the fact that they're white occupants of the house, Joe and his mother, and to have a black woman who had previously resided there, and you're not entirely sure why she doesn't anymore. And Joe is kind of like puzzled over how he's possibly going to talk about change over time. And they bring in a black character, and there's a lot of lines that are both like, everything's different, and then also, this is frozen in time. Like, the show decides to just not pick a lane as to whether anything has changed for Black or white Americans for decades.
Well, and beyond that, I find it odd that like this is allegedly set in a small town in Texas, and it seems like all of her memories of this house, like the family history you get of her is like, I was born in 1919. My dad was an architect who designed and built this house. It has like beautiful like craftsman style, like stained glass, whatever. And all of her memories, because she's choosing this journey, so of course like maybe she's not coming back to like revisit sites of trauma, but she's basically like coming back, like visiting a very romanticized vision of her own childhood, which I think also kind of confuses things about how a Black person might remember growing up in the segregated South. Like, and the fact that her neighborhood is now like, is it gentrified? Like, what's going on? Like, it's all white occupants. Like, what's happening with that?
Joe's mother works in the library, yes, and she's able to afford this home.
That was another question mark. I mean, I was watching with Anna, also a librarian, and I was like, this is fascinating because this house is like a good size. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I mean, like, go off, mom, like, good for you. But also, like, what's going on here? Like, I don't get it.
It had a very kind of pleasant Rolland moment that I like basically transcribed in full because I think it captures exactly what American Girl was trying to do at this same exact time, which is Joe is made aware by the doctor that there is the existence of this, you know, like hidey hole basically, and that she's like put special things in there. And one of the things that Dr. Brown is most excited to see is her marbles. And she says to Joe, marbles were our video games. And then she explains further, life wasn't any less exciting, just different. And What's
Hmm.
like fascinating about that moment is like a key kind of like greatest hits vibe of American Girl in the mid to early 90s, like pre 1997. Interesting that Mattel acquired American Girl the same time this show ended. Not a coincidental maybe, but
Whew.
um this whole thing of like life wasn't any less exciting, just different. Like she's pointing out what she loves about the marbles. That was like a central thesis of American Girl, right? That like certain things change, certain things stay the same, but you can like connect over old timey pastimes.
Yes. I think that's definitely true. Like there's like as you just noted, like the pivot of or like translating something in the past to be understandable or comprehensible to a child. Like we didn't have video games, we had marbles, like, but it's sort of like same use. And then, making a connection there, like not only explaining it, but inviting a connection between yourself and people of a similar age who lived in the past. Like, what did a child's life look like in 1919 or the 20s or 30s? I thought that was a really powerful thing. Also interesting that Mattel apparently owns Wishbone, or at least owns the
Oh,
rights to the story, because as part of that Mattel push now to replicate Barbie's success, they're also making a Wishbone movie. And I don't know what that will look like. I'm wondering if it's going to take the Wishbone format of like contemporary situation, almost like a meta story of like, how do we make a Wishbone movie? And then going back and like
oh.
maybe like jumping into some classic story to do it, or I don't know.
When you meet Wishbone, like his sole desire is to take a nap and everyone is waking him up. And that was kind of part of my
Relatable.
surprise was I thought it was a child and he is this like cranky, like middle-aged adult who's trying to sleep. And we learned that the family really loves Wishbone, but also like they're kind of like all buzzing around in the morning. And that's kind of like I learned, I didn't know if like the napping was just like a Wishbone fixture, but the truth is like that's teeing us up for Britt Van Winkle, who we learned takes a nap for 20 years. I loved this line. What would be the worst thing about sleeping for 20 years? Like, if you had to answer that question, how would you? Like, the worst thing, like, if you fell asleep for 20 years and
Mm.
you woke up, like, what do you think would be the hardest part about that?
I don't know. I mean, this is like perhaps like a commentary on my age, but like if I sleep too long in one position, I wake up and I'm like hobbling around my house. So like just thinking about that is tough. But like I don't know. Like what about you?
I better not be gray.
Oh
Like,
wow.
that's a condition. Like, if I'm
That's a
sleeping for 20
concern.
years, I need to be kept in, like, a bariatric chamber of some, like, level of comfort. There are days where because it like the whole conceit is like is it 20 minutes for a nap or 20 years, like which is better? I'd be so afraid about my fingernail and toenail situation. Like Wishbone invites us to
Yeah.
like gaze upon the beautiful beard, but the truth is for me specifically, like I'm an every week clipper,
Fair.
so I would be really concerned about 20 times 50 plus. Like that would just
Did you
be a
ever
lot
watch
of
like on daytime talk shows when they would have like the woman who has the longest fingernails in the world on? And
I
basically they
still
would be like, it's a cardiac event if we cut my nails because there's like arteries in here now. And I'd be like, I don't know why, but that like lives in my head where I'm like, why? Like I'm so scared of that, even though it's like I would have to consent to live that way and I wouldn't, but it's like it's dark.
So I think a lot of us had. So I was not watching Wishbone. I was watching Ricky Lake. I was watching
Who
Maury
wasn't? Of
Povich.
course.
I was watching Dateline. I have since seen shows where instead of just exploiting those people, they also force them to go to the doctor in the episode. And a lot of those people, the nails actually detach because they are able to
Oh,
reattach them.
you're
Maybe
gonna
that
make me
is too
vom.
maybe that is too difficult to process. Like, we're thinking of the bodily consequences of a 20-year nap. Like, obviously, it's very disorienting for Rip Van Winkle. Honestly, with the way things are now, like, he wakes up shocked that they're not loyal to the crown anymore. Who could even fathom if we woke up in 2043? How sideways things would be. It would be 150 degrees. I don't even trust it.
I imagine if somebody fell asleep in 2003 and they woke up today.
They would have just learned that the lead singer of Smash Mouth died and they'd say, put me back. They'd say, put me back. I'm not. I won't stay awake
I
under these
won't deal with it.
conditions.
Oh my God. Yeah. RIP to that individual. The fact that that was such a news alert, I know we're getting far afield, but like the fact that that was reported on my phone like so many different times. No offense to this man or his family, but I was like, this, like, Smash Mouth is like in the news now, like more than probably anyone. I mean, I did go listen to All Star when I heard the news. RIP to that man. But, yeah, I mean, it's wild thinking about 90s culture, like watching Ricky Lake and Wishbone. Like, I think sometimes there's a corniness with having like watched Wishbone. Like at the time, I remember like not wanting to super own it, but then it became kind of this calling card when he went to school. I think a little bit later, like, oh, I watched Wishbone. Like, those memes, a million memes that are like, I didn't read that classic, but I have seen the episode of Wishbone. And like I said, like I did go to school with people, myself included, where if I think about certain books, Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Wishbone edition is like the thing I think about in my mind, not the animated movie and definitely not the book. So I don't
See,
know.
that's so interesting to me because I read the illustrated classics versions of a lot of books and I loved those. Like that was how I
Yes.
first read Treasure Island, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. And then sometimes I would, like, within a year or two, graduate up to the original if I felt like I could handle it at that point. And what struck me was I knew the story of the Hounds of Baskervilles. I knew the story of Rip Van Winkle. I feel like I barely got the story in the Wishbone episode. I feel like you have to know a little bit what the story is, or it can be hard to follow. Like that was especially
Yes.
true of the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle episode I watched, where we just like kind of launched right into a dog
Yeah, tell me about
mystery.
that. Tell me about it.
So I wanted to do that because I love a mystery and I felt like the Slobbery Hound was just speaking to me. And I recently learned, like much to my delight, I've seen episodes of Bluey, not a lot, but I have seen Bluey, which is a cartoon blue dog and family. And the parents' professions on that show, one of them works at the airport and the other is an archaeologist because they're both dogs. They sniff. That's hilarious. So, and they dig.
So cute.
And what I like loved about this pairing kind of unintentionally was there is digging that Wishbone does and digging up the past, literally, that helps to solve a mystery. And in the Slobbery Hound, there's a line where they say the nose of Wishbone. Like Wishbone's like good sniffing ability helps him solve a crime, which I loved. So I did kind of enjoy that aspect of it. And I read The Hound of Baskervilles a very long time ago. But yeah, like if you were trying to like save yourself some hours and not read a book for class, I don't know that Wishbone would totally get you there.
That is fair. I mean, I don't know, like if you stack him up against Cliff Notes, I mean, he's not going to like land the plane for you, but I think the thing I had always admired about Wishbone was like the sheer audacity of this show. Like we were talking about off air a little bit and I was saying like, it is absolutely unhinged that there were adults in 1995 who were like, we will be tackling the story of Joan of Arc with a dog. And, he's going to be kind of like her second in command, or I forget like his exact role. But I remember watching that and just being like, this is nuts that like I'm watching this dog who's always the internal like monologue is a man, a grown man who basically just keeps kind of saying like, oh God, I wish I didn't have to work this hard. Like, I just want to take a nap. Like, oh, maybe I can get a snack over here. And it's like, what is going on? It was like so absurd and like, but just so charming that I was willing to go with them on almost anything. I mean, they even made me care about the Odyssey, which I had to read for summer reading one year. And I like did not appreciate at all at the time. I don't know if you had to read that for school as well.
I did. And I stand by not appreciating it.
Fair. Entirely. I mean, I just was like, I think summer reading is misguided when you're being asked to read books like that would actually benefit from somebody saying like, and here's what's going on in this part of the book. Because I like Odysseus in some ways was lost. I had no idea what was going on. So that's where Wishbone did me a solid, where I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I think I sort of understand. And like the internal monologue of Wishbone, I was like, I'd rather be taking a nap or like doing literally anything. Like, I love to read. But sometimes with summer reading, I had such an attitude about it because I was being told what to read. And if it wasn't jiving with me, I was like, I'm out. And so Wishbone and I, like, that's where we had like a mind meld sometimes where I'm like, thank you for covering the Odyssey. Like, I needed this.
I think there's a fun trajectory to track from knowing that things like Wishbone existed, right? Where no one goes out of their way to over explain why this dog is reenacting a classic book, right? Mm-hmm. Like he simply is. From there to like thinking about how formative Vine was for a lot of people, like the Vine and the kind of, I know Tumblr is coming back, but the kind of Vine and Tumblr era. And then looking at TikTok, like people, I think, succeed on TikTok when they're not self-conscious about what they're doing. And certainly, obviously, people who are like exploiting their families on TikTok, that's a separate conversation.
That's different, yeah.
But people who do like silly, goofy, interesting tricks or like who are just kind of willing. One of my favorite creators is a person who always pretends that he's on the telephone. And like the telephone call he like reenacted for us today was that he was Switzerland having a conversation about a fight between the United States and the UK. That's funny.
That's great. But I think
like
gold.
That creative impulse comes from being exposed to stuff like this for decades.
Yes, I think that's entirely true. Like even like I forget what it's called now because I haven't seen it in a while, but there's like an Instagram account where someone has a skeleton and they like pose it in weird ways and like or Sylvanian drama. Do you ever watch that on TikTok? Okay.
Yes.
That is like my sense of humor, which is like for better or for worse. Whenever I see that and somebody like a friend of mine was not feeling well and I sent them that, and I was like, for whatever it's worth, like that makes me laugh every time that comes across my account. And it's sort of like just using children's toys, but like mapping onto it like this unhinged, like totally inappropriate like scene. And like, I don't know, it just always makes me laugh. But I think I'm prepared to laugh at that because I grew up with things like Wishbone. And I'm sorry, kids today who are using AI to write your book reports, like you will never have the kind of resource that Wishbone was. I mean, I guess it is. I just want to say if anyone wants to go watch Wishbone, it's all on Internet Archive and it's also all on YouTube.
It is very easy to find Wishbone, and unlike certain American Girl movies that are being stripped from the internet, it is fun, I think, also. There's such an idea right now, I think, of like, where do we have any kind of consensus or common culture? And I think that there's like very good reasons why you don't just make every student read the same 30 books that people read 100 years ago. I think there's very good reasons to question that. And like we, in our college education, there were a lot of conversations about whether like a core or a classics curriculum had a value. I think people at a lot of liberal arts schools are continuing to like think that or rethink that. At the same time, right? Like there are basic references that I think help you in life because in certain cultures, like one of my sites I work at, we talk about how like references to the Bible were so baked into that culture and that place and time that you could have entire conversations where you were pulling from threads of the Bible and people were expected to understand. When we kind of lack so little of that right now, there are basic stories that it does help to still know. Like if someone like rappers, right, joke about, you know, like Headless Horseman and Rip Van Winkle, it's helpful to know, oh, he took a 20-year nap.
Yeah. And what was sort of, I agree, like there are some like sort of cultural lexicon sort of things that you might be of the school that's like Western Civ, like west of what, like, you know, it's mostly like a meaningless concept at this point or a very exclusionary one. And yet like to even do things as simple as crosswords, like knowing certain biblical stories or certain things like that can be helpful. But what I actually was very surprised by, because I kind of went into Wishbone again thinking like, is it all just so-called great books, which is a concept that I'm very skeptical of because I think we grew up in this sort of like postmodern grad program of like, we had a TA Western Civ while also being skeptical of the concept itself. But in reading...
That we is you. I somehow never did Western Civ.
Again, the humble brag. I had every terrible TA assignment you could possibly have. This man is dead, like the singer of Smash Mouth, and I'm not going to name him, but my first teaching assignment, I went from being in college to TAing a class, being the grader of an upper level modern Indian history class. I knew nothing about the history of modern India, and the professor was like, just stay a week ahead of the students, like you'll be fine. And what he did not prepare me for was that we would be reading his self-published erotic novel. and I would be invited to interview him about choice scenes in front of the class. And literally he was like, write on pieces of paper questions for Mary, like pass them up and she'll interview me in front of all of you, like book talk. In some ways, preparation for us. We're not going to do this. And literally the papers I'll never forget were like, why did you make us read this horrible book? Like, who hurt you? Why do you have mommy issues? And I was like, literally like on the fly having to improv like real questions. And I was like, is this teaching? And I did Western Civ. Like I did it all. I did the US surveys, both parts.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350 plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Anyway, it was a wild ride. I learned some things, not other things. But what I learned from the oral history of Wishbone is that the writers actually were being very inclusive in their storytelling in ways that some people that maybe some of us TA'd Western Civ for were not. In that when they did storytelling using indigenous histories and stories, and they reached out to the tribes themselves to be part of the storytelling process, to seek permission first of all, and then to involve in members of the tribe behind the scenes to make sure everything was respectful. And Mo Rocca, his first showbiz job I learned was writing for Wishbone, and he said that another wild choice, they chose to cover the Our Lady of Guadalupe story, and he wrote that episode, and he was like, it was really meaningful for me because his mother is from, I think, Latin America, and like this was like a part of her culture growing up, and like it was very like personally meaningful to tell a story about Latin American history and culture. And so it's like that was kind of surprising to me, where I was like, is Wishbone like more inclusive than certain classes that I've been associated with?
I think I've dropped this before, but I canonically used my first Yahoo email address to email Mo Rocca years ago when I was in high school.
Yep,
and he wrote back.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I remember this.
He wrote back, and in this interview, I really like this line. He says, writing on that show meant taking some of the greatest stories ever told, books I was supposed to read in college and hadn't, and retelling them in a half hour for kids with a dog in the lead role. It was storytelling boot camp. And I think it's this notion that if you understand a topic fairly well, you can explain it to a peer or an adult generally, but if you know it extraordinarily well, you can explain it to anyone. And there were moments in watching the Sherlock Holmes episode. It is brilliant because Sherlock Holmes books are actually very dense, and I've tried to read all of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's mysteries, and I don't actually enjoy them very much because the genre has been like so improved, in my opinion, in the past 120 to 40 years that it's hard now to actually go back to these originals. But they distill a fairly complex story about a death and a murder mystery into something that's like slightly camp, and the fact that it's the Hounds of Baskervilles and that there is a dog actually solving this mystery was like very funny. Like they actually do a very good job with it.
Yeah, like there's such a sense of humor, I think, at the center of it, and also just like earnestness in a way that's not annoying, but like genuine and real. And like, I don't know, you just get such a good feeling watching the show. And I have to talk about the episode I watched, First Impressions or Pride and Prejudice, and truly a Profile and Courage Award to every actor on Wishbone who is literally acting opposite a dog.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you have to stop yourself and be like, this woman. So I'm watching Pride and Prejudice, and Wishbone is Darcy. And like, just sit with that a minute. And like the contemporary premise of this is like, what's his name? The boy, what's his name? Joe has a school dance coming up. And basically it's like everyone's just going to go to the dance, but somebody starts a rumor that like, people are going to start asking other people to the dance. And then there's like all these rumors spread like, well, I asked you and you said no. And like rumors are spreading. And he's like, it's tearing my friend group apart. Like, and it's like, there's so much like prejudicial like gossip, I guess, going around. And he's like, I don't even know what to wear to the dance. He has a mushroom cut, which is very 90s. He's wearing like rugby shirts, again, very 90s, coming back. But Wishbone as Darcy, like the woman who plays Elizabeth Bennet deserves an Academy Award or Emmy, because the fact that this woman is like both sparring with Wishbone and then like at the end like getting romantic in a very like appropriate way. I was telling you before, like I was laughing so hard. First of all, the woman who plays Caroline Bingley is amazing, and she walks through the first party scene and just yells punch to like no one in particular, like somebody bring me punch. I'm like, you're an icon. Like that's that camp feeling coming through. And in the last scene, like, so in the book, Jane gets proposed to by Bingley, and then like Mr. Darcy proposes to Elizabeth. So we see Jane get proposed to, and I'm like, oh my God, are we gonna have Wishbone like propose to this woman? Like, I don't know, like there's certain line, like there's a line in the sand. I'm just like, I don't know. And then she's like, hey, she's kind of like looking at him, and I'm like, how is she looking at him like I'm so into you? It's a dog. Like just in real life, like how is this actress like doing this? And then he basically puts his paw on her hand. He's like, I want to get to know you better. Like, so I was like, thank God, like we don't have Wishbone proposing to her at the end. But he does do the formal like kind of line dancing. And then what's really cool, and I don't know if your episode was like this, but at the end of the episode, you hear Wishbone's voice saying like, how did we make this like movie magic? And he's like, the way that I could do all these dances is because there's a job called choreographer, and it shows the choreographer like teaching them how to dance. And it's sort of like, this is a job like people do. And I was like, that's kind of cool too. It kind of reminded me of like an American Girl magazine moment of like, this is a job that like you could grow up and do yourself.
Out of a 27 to 28 minute, public access show, about 3 minutes is dedicated to behind the scenes. And mine was sort of tongue-in-cheek because it was supposed to be set in England, and mine was all about how like they didn't have the budget for that, so how did they make it look like this was actually being filmed in England for the Slobbery Hound. And it was very clever. They also talked in the Rip Van Winkle episode, basically the scene where Wishbone is intoxicated, right? I mean, that's like what the actual story is, that he sort of almost has like a bad trip that results in a 20-year slumber. How did they film that? And how did they manipulate the audio and the video and like the way that they actually shot that in double speed? I remember there being shows when we were younger about like going into a TV studio or like thinking about like the production of something. And I don't think as a younger person, right? Like we always had like the family camera. And then I remember what a big deal it was when digital cameras became cheap enough that I always had my own, right? From like high school on, I always had my own camera. So it went from like, we had a family camera that was like not cheap, and not because we spent a lot of money, but it just wasn't cheap. And then I had a pretty like inexpensive digital camera that took decent photos, to now thinking of like just how widespread it is that your phone would be a camera.
Yeah.
That's better than what our family camera. We've talked about this with computers, but like the way that technology has changed since the time that we were watching Wishbone. Now you can set up a tripod and film yourself, and it's pretty high quality.
Yeah. I mean, I think like you were saying before, the fact that like there are people who can make like Wishbone parodies or like sort of lookalike content on TikTok pretty easily. Whereas like Wishbone itself was like this huge endeavor and seemed so miraculous at the time. Like there's something in this oral history too about how they had really early CGI in this, and they were so like, they used to get feedback from other people in the field being like, whoa, like in Oliver Twist, like they make the city of London in the distance, and they were like, yeah, that cost us like a fortune. Like it was like $40 million or something to make Wishbone, or like more than that.
But then it actually looks real. Like it doesn't have that uncanny feeling of CGI. Like that actor is actually talking to a dog.
That's right. So it was $20 million to make 40 episodes of Wishbone, but that's in 1995 money.
Worth every penny. What did you make of neighbor Angie, who has an antagonistic relationship with Wishbone?
Or Wanda, or whatever her name is. Is it Angie? I get names wrong all the time, so I'm probably wrong on this.
Angie is like the antagonistic neighbor, but there's multiple plot lines that I'm going to boil down to like, why is this dog acting like a dog? Like, why is the dog digging up the yard? Why is the dog digging
up? Well, first of all, I was like, ma'am, why are you putting out these pink flamingos in like seemingly a haphazard pattern. I was like, I'm here for pink flamingos, but what's going on? And then she's like putting it comically in the ground and it's like clearly hitting something and it's the time capsule they're looking for, and Wishbone digs it up and she's like, your dog's doing it again. And like to your point, like acting like a dog. She's like, ah, like acts like it's always the first time when it's like, this is probably the 100th time Wishbone has like been in your yard.
In digging up the past, everyone is absolutely shocked that Wishbone is able to like dig a hole as an animal.
Yeah, they're like, oh my God.
Like a key element of like solving a crime in the Slobbery Hound is the fact that like his nose is very strong. And in the episode we watched together, there is this kind of like throwing out of this idea that to find something underground, they're going to need to use sonar. And then there's an equally complex thing that is tossed out about solving something in that episode. And then like Wishbone just like literally sniffs it out and solves the issue. Amazing.
It's amazing. I mean, but I wonder like for yours, like for mine, some of the joy was like watching Wishbone not do a British accent, or like the actor was sort of like trying to do what I would call a mid-Atlantic accent. It was almost like Katharine Hepburn-ish, or like not Katharine Hepburn, but like trying to be slightly different than regular Wishbone because everyone else was trying to be British. And it, again, they're in Dallas. Like it's a whole, like it's a vibe. It's a whole thing happening. But yeah, so like that was the weirdness there. But with Sherlock Holmes, it's like there are many animals that have been called upon to play Sherlock Holmes, or at least also a mouse. Like I don't know if you ever saw The Great Mouse Detective, which to me is like a knockoff of Sherlock Holmes, but it's like interesting that Wishbone was like following in that tradition. Or I guess maybe inaugurating it. I don't know what came first.
Honestly, I mean, I think Ratatouille is a rare like part of my cultural package of things that I am like pretty familiar with about like animals doing human things. Like I don't know if that's always like my top tier entertainment. But I'll be honest, like watching Wishbone in a Sherlock Holmes situation, talking to Watson, really enjoyed that. Like the juxtaposition of him like doing in-depth crime solving and then someone saying if Wishbone is outside, he needs to be on a leash. You know, like the education never stops. Like we're getting forensics, we're getting basic dog safety. I respect it. Like today, Wishbone would 100% probably be a service animal. That would be my guess. Like,
yes,
they'd be like, what does he perform? And they'd be like, here's his CV.
Hard to say. They're like everything and nothing. This dog, he can dig. He can do Charles Dickens. He can do Joan of Arc. He'll do the Odyssey. It won't be your favorite, but he can do that. What's interesting about like Wishbone in modern day life is that the show doesn't really do any kind of work to explain why it is that Joe brings Wishbone everywhere with him as if he was a service dog. Like he's at the library, he's at school, like he's at the school dance, which again, I'm like, I mean, like what did Joe say like before we join them at the dance? Like we're already there with them. Like there's just no explanation, but it's like when Joe walks in and like Wishbone's there, he's not like, this is my anxiety dog, like my middle school dance anxiety dog, which we all probably would have benefited from. But like, they're like, oh yeah, of course, Joe, like you can bring Wishbone. Like what?
I think that's something charming about this era of sitcoms is there's no over explaining, right? From like Silver Spoons to like, you know, like improbable situations just happen all the time. And we're not going to spend like a ton of energy wasted on getting to the bottom of it. Like that's like we recently discussed Family Matters, where a person could go in and out of a chamber and completely change themselves. No one like really sat down and said like, we're going to suck the fun out of this by trying to explain it.
Yeah, like here's the physics on that. Like actually you can't. Or, but it's like, we also had movies that were like, yeah, your grandfather left you the Minnesota Twins, so now you're the coach, or like you're the manager. I mean, I watched that movie and I was like, seems plausible, okay. Or like the boy who could throw like a 90-mile-per-hour fastball, like Rookie of the Year. Like, I don't know why baseball movies are like what's in my head right now, but I'm like, there were many things that we watched that I just sort of wholesale was like, okay, like if that's what they're saying, cool.
You know, and a lot of other, I think what's interesting about this is it's not like fully of a fantasy genre. It feels very rooted in like everyday middle or upper middle class life. you know, there was also a very funny moment where it was like the things I'm learning on this show. There is a conversation between Joe and his mom about talking about a mine operation. And Joe says, well, nobody misses that. It has to be something that people miss. And then when Dr. Brown shows up, she brings up this same topic again. And we learn that there's EPA violations. And she says, that's a shame.
I laughed at that so hard. And I was like, EPA violation. And she's like, that's a shame. A lot of people
That's a
work
shame.
there. I'm like, damn that EPA.
There's so many kind of like kitschy moments in this show. But I'm like grateful that they just kind of take the story on. And my assumption always was that there was like a narrator saying like, today's episode is going to be about Rip Van Winkle, which is a story by Washington Irving. No, you don't get any preamble.
Nope.
We're asked, what's the story, Wishbone? We get another tale. We enjoy our time with Joe. Mom, questions are not asked about Dad, ? Or
I think like I don't know if it was covered. So the release order of the episodes was not the order in which they were written or filmed. They basically started with Tom Sawyer because they thought kids would like the story. And they did that one like midway through and they were like, we kind of have it figured out at this point, like what the special sauce is. So we're going to start with that. So I think I want to go back and watch that one because I'm wondering like, do they do some exposition in that one after they realize that's going to be the first one dropped that maybe covers what happened with Dad? Or is it just sort of like, again, one of those things that by the way, and we all just sort of accept it where they're like, yeah, my dad's dead. Moving on.
My dog is a classically trained
my dog
professor
is my
of literature,
preacher, teacher, anything I need. He is my father figure. He's many things that maybe he should not be, but we're all rolling with it. And like, I don't know, I'm just thinking like Wishbone up there with other 90s storytelling shows, like Storytellers on VH1. Like recently I was rewatching Don't Ask the Storytellers with Stevie Nicks, which is truly a ride if you can find it. And a lot of her stories, I'm like, I can't follow this, but I'm entertained by it. And like, I don't know if your narrative is like real, but I've just signed on to you as a person so much at this point that like, I'm into your version of events, like whether or not it's the truth. And the same could be said for Wishbone.
There's something about this moment of television though, right? And storytelling. If you watch True Life, which I know that you did, right?
Yeah, love True Life.
Like there was an era in that kind of reality TV where we spent an hour with a person or a small set of people and it was impactful. And then we maybe thought about them a half a dozen times in the intervening decades. Now, some of those people are like stitching their episodes and making videos of themselves, like offering a follow-up. And part of me kind of wonders, like, where's the magic in the mystery?
Wow.
Right? Like, honestly, part of me is like, leave Wishbone in the past. Like,
Ooh.
He's a beautiful, like, Soccer passed away, unfortunately, in Texas. Soccer, lead Wishbone, is actually
R.I.P.
from Connecticut. Like,
thank you.
We're not going to do
like all the
better.
greats. He's from Connecticut.
Like, how are we
Wow.
going to do better than Soccer?
That's what the trainer said in this oral history. She was like, Jackie was like, I've been asked if I would participate in the Wishbone movie. And honestly, I just don't know how I would feel looking down and not seeing Soccer staring back at me. And like, Soccer was just so beautiful. And like, she does kind of slam Soccer. And she was like, he wasn't like talking about casting Soccer. Like basically they just had a call at like a Marriott out on like a lawn and they were like made Soccer like run around. And it says, it takes a special kind of dog that enjoys like Hollywood. Soccer wasn't the smartest dog I've ever trained, but he had the willingness to please and he had a great heart. I mean, he'd walk on water for me. Wow. So basically Jackie was like, he pleases me, therefore he's the best. But she's like, I can't imagine training a new Wishbone.
Please rate Beethoven, Air Bud, and Wishbone.
Wishbone's number 1, no question.
Okay.
Air Bud number 2, because Air Bud somehow came back for a sequel, and I think also excelled in more than one sport beyond basketball. And
he did all the sports.
What did Beethoven do? He was just big
and slobbery. I think Beethoven is kind of a miss for me. I do feel like Airbud would have to be my top because I feel like the checks would write themselves. And I don't know that we need another like know-it-all male in the literature space. Like, I love Wishbone, but I think
Do
that
not compare Wishbone to Guy in your MFA. Do not ruin this for me. No.
Wishbone isn't that, but like, to be fair, I do feel like Airbud, like the checks would write, like you could show up anywhere.
Well, I mean, like Airbud is, Airbud's like the dog on the skateboard who like kicks around. And everyone's like, oh my God, like you're
I'd hire a handler because I don't want to be around a dog that much, but I would, I think it could be very lucrative. My last question related to this, because it occurred to me, please rank in order of importance: the wishbone, the funny bone, and the backbone.
Damn.
You can tell I never really saw this series as a child and had to like pull.
You're really pulling here.
Wishbone inspired me.
Okay. I mean, do you have a personal ranking for this?
I mean, I feel like Wishbone character ranks high, but like I never really took pleasure in pulling apart the wishbone.
Okay.
So fair. I feel like that automatically, I'm going to prioritize Funny Bone because when you hurt it, it hurts really bad. And I also think humor is important.
Wow. Okay. You just taught me a lesson, not unlike Wishbone. I'll accept your ranking. That's fine. I'll roll with
you know, I've welcomed Wishbone into my life. I appreciate him. I think he probably has more to teach me. This really truthfully like made me curious about the illustrated classics I read as a child and how different they were, right? And like what were they trying to drill down? Because the show really does an excellent job of taking a story that isn't like super pleasurable to read in the 21st century in the case of Rip Van Winkle and makes it funny and translates the humor for a new audience. So like they won me over there.
They did. I mean, I think it, like to your point, I didn't enjoy reading a lot of the books that Wishbone covered. And he got me through that. So like to me, he's not like Guy in your MFA. He's like Guy in the back of the class who also doesn't really want to be thinking about this thing right now or doing this thing. And sort of like fellow mischief maker Wishbone. So, I mean, that's kind of how he lives in my heart. But also, like, I'm now thinking about those same illustrated classics that I read, those hardcover books. I can see them in my head. Like, I had a Little Women one. Like, I had a ton of those. And I'm, like, wondering how those read now. I don't know. I haven't reread them. Write to us if you've read any of those recently and how they hold up, if we should be reading any of them.
Or if they're popular. I don't know that they have maybe the same popularity as they once did. I really don't know. I mean, I feel like Barnes and Noble and those kinds of companies, like they're putting all their money into just like continually reprinting more interesting looking versions of these books. But it's like, you're not changing the words or like putting dogs in them. So I don't think the Wishbone audience is going to come running with their credit cards.
No, we're a very specific audience. And like I told you off air, Anna had like just dropped this week that she had a stuffed animal Wishbone and she can't find it. But if I find it, I'll post a picture of it. I was like, wow, I'm so jealous. Like I wish. I mean, so I guess like the Wishbone merch like never took off is what I read in some of these histories. Like that guy ended up pulling the plug after 2 years because the merch never took off and he kind of realized like I'm spending 40 mil and I'm not making any money back. So he just got up on the last day of production and instead of like taking the coward way out and being like, we'll see, he just got up and was like, this is the last episode. Thanks everyone. We made something special. Bye.
It wouldn't happen in this economy. Netflix would be like, we're going to pay the writers $8 a piece, but we are going to order 100 more episodes to stream.
Absolutely. 100%. Yep. That is what would happen. Wow. I don't know if I'll see the Wishbone movie. Like, are you going to see it? If it happens, big if.
I think I'm intrigued. I do think a lot of people are right that maybe some of the wrong lessons are being taken away from why Barbie was so successful. I do also think that Barbie is singular. Even when you talk about American Girl, people see all different things of themselves in different pockets of American Girl. Even though Barbie has had 1,000 careers, she's Barbie.
Yeah, and I think that would be a hard thing to translate in American Girl, to your point, because the whole point is like having different backstories and personas as opposed to like different occupations, which is about as different as Barbies get from one another.
Like, most people know Barbie, they know Ken. I'm sure the Hot Wheels movie will do great.
Wow, can't even imagine. I mean, cars already exist, so what story is left to tell? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm like the wrong audience for that.
I think that there's probably a captivating Hot Wheels story to be told. Will it be done by Greta Gerwig? I'm skeptical, but I'm sure the right person will come forward to shepherd Wishbone to a new audience. I do think there are really interesting things that you could probably do for less than 20 million a season now that would make Wishbone really captivating. And there would be modern stories that could be told to a young audience, like knowing that they had Indigenous consultants, right? And own voices, before that was a term that people would have known in the industry. There are super interesting things that you could do now with Wishbone to bring new stories to a different generation. I'd love to say that, we could use a cat, but like, I just know that's not how it is.
I mean, I just feel like it would be even more like antisocial, even more anti-authority. It would be like, I want to take it, like instead of Wishbone being like, I want to take a nap, but I'm going to go help Joe do XYZ, would just be like, who's Joe? I don't care. I have my own plan for today and this is not it.
No. Cats would be like, you can listen to my story or no story. Move it along.
Cats would be like, you think I remember who you are? Forget it.
No.
Not happening.
They would not be thumbing through the classics. I do think we're covering Julie on the main feed. I do think that Wishbone could do some interesting things with 1970s San Francisco, but until that collaboration happens, what are we doing next on the Patreon feed?
We're reading Freaks, Gleeks, and Dawson's Creek, How 17 Shows Transform Television. It just came out in June by Thea Glassman. With a foreword by Jennifer Armstrong. I don't know who that is, but I'm very excited to read about all of these shows, which include The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, My So-Called Life, Dawson's Creek, Freaks and Geeks, The OC, Friday Night Lights, and Glee. Wow.
That's my bad. I keep saying Geeks, and it is Gleeks because I've never actually seen Glee.
Oh my God. What?
So I may have to catch up on that a little bit.
Well, you better like punch 9-1 in your phone before you hit play on the pilot. That's all I'm going to say. Wow, that show sent me.
Very excited. I'm very excited, especially to read something critical about The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Very, very excited about that. So we are coming for you. Freaks, Gleeks, and Dawson's Creek. I was wrong.
Thank you, everyone. See you on the Discord. Join us there. Love chatting with everyone. We have a feed where you can suggest future episodes, future watch-alongs, future PowerPoint parties. Thanks again for supporting this community, and we will see you on our next episode.